lethargically began to miss what I wanted. Where I said, I'll just go in. No, don't worry about it. I got you. He promoted my continuation of sleep, and I wanted to allow it. But I want stuff for the whole weekend, so I'll get it. I fought sleep. I don't think you want to go in there. Chris pointed to Confederate flags over the side of the building, painted with the words "No bomb." Chris got me everything I wanted from the store, and I remember as I write this, I never paid him back. He never asked me to. That store and the serpentine road that I would have thought was beautiful was the last thing I saw before going behind the gate of the Spelunky grounds and before being locked in. I spent the entire Labor Day weekend afraid of being seen. I heard from the tent what I assumed to be wolves. Chris informed me that they were just coyotes and they would not come near. That they were more afraid of us and fire than we were of them. But every time I heard a truck on the road, I felt like Emmett Till and Roy Bryant knocked on his uncle's door. Images of men peeing on trees kept me awake. Dogs marking their territory, looking for runaways from urban areas, from the concrete prisons of being surveilled. They sent the dogs into trees to bite and rip at the knees of those who tried to reach the other side of programs. Don't be mad when I say, Lord told me to fear the pack, but to fear the hands that free the dogs even more. Now we'll read some of my newer stuff. I am working on a novel right now. My father passed away during the pandemic. So that's been some grief I'm still going through. To kind of like grieve and, grieve a person who many times I felt like trying to tear me down, especially after I came out of the closet. So it's just like a weird place to kind of grieve and miss someone who inflicted a lot of trauma. That's just the way life is. Filter these in blue or indigo if you're him. This is I wrote this poem, and this is what inspired me to write the novel I'm writing right now. 1. A Black boy sits in a classroom and he feels like he can be more of himself in this space because his father cannot follow him. However, he has to be surrounded by his friends, all of them Black girls, because there are other bullies in this world. Black girls have been his shield since the 2nd grade. He has never seen them as the girlfriends in the way his father does when he lies to himself. This young man has only seen them as the home warriors, sharpening their weapons towards the mouths of those who wish to call him out of his name. He can only learn this way, learn when he feels safe. He learned early that Black women saved his life. Women who showed up like his 2 older sisters who both taught this boy that he was beautiful, even though he did not believe it, too. A Black boy goes to church with his family every Sunday, and from the moment he walks into the arched doors, he feels like all eyes are on him. The eyes of the congregants who smile in his mother's face, the parishioners who smile in his face, smiling like the spirit of Longinus. He wonders if this will be one of those Sundays when the pastor, who too smiles on his face, will speak on the divine purpose of heterosexual marriage. The boy wonders if he will be damned on this day. And on all other Sundays, caged by stained glass windows, depictions of Black Jesus. On Sundays, when the Yellow Dog Choir sings, the boy wants to lift his voice in solo, but he knows the devotees will not hear his passion or envision the passion, his suffering. They will only hear the tenor of his voice, the softness that lets them know that he is the abomination that they need to protect their holiness from. When death comes, he wonders if the judgment of their God will be as piercing as the thorns of his disciples. 3. A Black boy walks into a barber shop after having been away for some time. The young man feels just like he is at home because he will hide pieces of himself in his silence. He never speaks up because he feels like his voice is withheld. He is used to his father bringing him, but he can drive himself now. He will be surrounded by the safety of shared glass skin from anywhere between 45 minutes to 2 hours. And he will leave looking like a better version of himself. But a little bit of him died each time an elder asked him about a girlfriend that he never had or wanted. He felt the need to lie to them. He often wonders if his ancestors are still looking out for him, even though he's just vowed that he never bear branches. He laughs at all the men's jokes, even though they at times find holes in the cement that has been hardening around his chest, protecting him from cuts that he doesn't have to pay $12 for. The boy's price. Even though he is in his first year of college, he pays the boy's price. Because he is at home visiting his childhood barber. He is at home visiting, and his childhood barber is glad to see him. 4. A young black man goes to his family reunion and he limits his speech and movement so much you can imagine him with shackles and handcuffs. He shrinks himself around uncles and cousins who press him to talk about the girls of his life. He lies himself to the bathroom. He finds himself in the kitchen and he expands out of his chest amongst the women, floating in their laughter, black women, the sisters of his father, the women who fed him recipes that his father never learned to prepare, women with the power to hold generations, women with the power to hug away all shame, the women who raised the man who raised him. When he leaves the kitchen, he will feel comfortable enough to ask his favorite uncle for some of his homemade white lightning. His uncle will be surrounded by men who also share the young man's blood, but they scab over when the young man opens his mouth and he notices this and lowers his volume. The audacity is monstrous. His favorite uncle drops his voice as he pours his nephew a drink. He tells him to mix it with something sweet. His nephew does. His favorite uncle doesn't ask him about girls. He asks him about everything but. And as the young man walks into the crowd of family to put food in his stomach, he remembers that he is safe. 5. A black man walks into his classroom for the first time. Ever since he accepted the job, he has been walking backwards past his teenage self in the hallways of the middle school that taught him how scars are. He can still feel the grime that has been thrown into his back when he walks down the corridors. He sometimes lives in the first time that he was called a faggot, lives in the loneliness of not being able to tell anyone. He couldn't give his parents more than they had already assumed. The silence they carried when they were around him only got heavier over time, through a phase that did not end. Heavier than anything his father ever attempted to carry, ever wanted to carry. Standing in his classroom, the man knows stones will be thrown at him once again. He shows up every day as his entire self, hoping that maybe one day a student will see something in him that the man never saw in himself growing up, never saw himself growing up, an adult version of something inside him that he thought needed to die. 6. A black man attends his father's funeral. There is so much more that the son wants to say, that he wants to be heard by his father's ears. He can only say it to the women. Praying it finds ears made more amenable in death. The man's aunt, one of his father's many sisters, hugs him and convinces. Her voice falters as she speaks. It feels so good to her. It feels like her. I'll read this, that is also from my grief poem. Grief is such a haunt, a poltergeist that cannot be banished, a war with never-ending battles. Only grief pauses in a repetition of mourning bells, reminding me that there are voices in my apartment only I can hear. This mess will linger until I wake up one day to the towel he is warding off his brushes, or the sharp cadences of hummingbirds, and not the sounds of the cupboards opening and closing by themselves. These are some poems I wrote about Virginia while I was visiting to, like, back and forth during the pandemic to, you know, handle my father's affairs. Virginia poem A. The aroma of honeysuckle all over Virginia is overwhelming. Bees must flock to this place knowing that it was the sequel that gave way to the first petal. Us Virginians took this smell as our own, took it into our colonial-style brick homes to hide the funk that builds up when men gather. We tried, but we will never be these, and we damn sure ain't flowers. I ponder us the caterpillar, fat and gorgeous, willing to come. Virginia poem B. To think there was a time in Virginia when summer meant the canopies of maple, gum, and tulip trees darkened out the sky, turned the world into malachite, and nothing man-made broke the ceiling. To think the Appalachians made the people of this garden imagine kinder gods. To think this place felt vast and vivid, instead of this hollow carved out by the hands of ghosts, waiting to be acknowledged so that they can find rest. This place did not have to be cursed, but the ocean carried outsiders who all wanted this place to be something other than evil. To think, before this place was touched by blind vessels in search of treasures they had no right to define, even if it meant the erasure of me, or better yet, return me to the drab light of my peoples. Virginia poem C. A storm comes to visit this porch every summer evening. I watch it creep up from the other side of the train tracks, creep in from the other side of the river where the dense forests give way to the nodding pines and trees. From the southeast where all those mountain-born rivers meet the Chesapeake Bay. Down from where the dolphins swim upstream for fish, and the horses jump ship from new shores, only to become wild and untamed. It'll break open the sky, giving more water than a forced baptism, lasting a moment shy of perfect. I've seen this grief up in the trees, and my blood is from the darkest gray of its clouds. Virginia poem B. Do you ever see the ocean lie flat like it does off the coast of the eastern Atlantic? See sand smoother than the cotton of your parents' clothes, meet the water like an invisible sea. The one your mother rushed to sew those Easter pants before church. From a boat, the land was so flat that you could step over the beach and the trees entirely with one gait or the steel of a sword. Why ignore the low country from mountains too old to know what man even is? Cities too new to know that they are scars. Who breaks bread in those brick prison houses? Who thought those trees too tall to skip? The ones who grew by. Time slows down for them, telling stories and seasons. And did you know that the salt helps you taste the gall? And I can read one more, I guess. I'll read one more from my book. And I'll close out. And I call this one Fire Next Time. These are all notes. The book's called Fire, sorry, y'all. These are all notes I wrote like during the same summer. Because that was the summer that Khalid Browder killed himself. If you don't know who Khalid Browder is, please Google it. And that was also the summer that Tajiria Becton and a group of her friends, they were swimming in that pool, swimming pool outside of Dallas, Texas. They were accosted by cops just for being black girls swimming in a public pool. But the one I'm going to read is also from that summer, which is about the church shooting that happened in North Carolina. It's called Fire Next Time. It was on June 7, 2015. Attacks on black churches are nothing new. I remember in the late 90s when my father started his journey into becoming a pastor. He was from a rural town where the mouth of the Tappahannock River met Chesapeake Bay, a peninsula because another river, the Rappahannock, had a mouth that yawned just on this other side. His journey into clergy took us back to regions where people knew him as a boy, to revivals in the dead of night, in corn and wheat fields so dark that the church had to be heaven in my adolescent mind. There were a string of arson attacks on black churches during this time. So I remember sitting in the church afraid of the devil, yes, but afraid he was going to seek his revenge on God through his or her worshipers. Then and now, the choir would be singing. It was just a shabby old place where we used to sing Amazing Grace. We used to have a good time all over, talking about a real good time. And I would be sitting in the pew expecting smoking heat to rise and doors to be barred shut against the screams of the devoted. This is the religion forced upon us when ours was deemed witchcraft, polytheistic for the savage. Now the savage burns us during prayer time. But the savage is just misunderstood and lonely with the pastor being quiet. They burned 16th Street Baptist Church into a brick oven. They roasted 4 little girls beyond the recognition of their parents, beyond the ability to hear choir sing again. Made the government pass the Church Arson Prevention Act during the Civil Rights Movement. Made Clinton create the National Church Arson Task Force in the 90s. Made this happen after they enslaved us in dogma, and freed us to the demons, freed us to black codes, Jim Crow, and black on black crime. Now they want to tell us that the demons suffer from themselves, that wolves are not wolves, and we keep saying, go happy day. We never suffer from ourselves. We create suffering and uncomfortable remembrance that causes our flesh to be forever guilty of the image. We just keep saying, oh, happy day, hoping we'll sprout wings while the wolves gnaw our feet. Who needs feet with wings? Who needs to land in heaven? Heaven has no stones. It used to be a shabby old place where we believed in amazing grace. Used to be, oh Lord. Thank you.
I think we have, thank you so much for that, beautiful.
Thank you.
I think we have there's enough time to ask any questions if anyone wants to ask Trey any questions about poetry or just his process or anything like that. That's so great. Lindsay.
Do you write rhyming poetry?
I used to, but now I'm very weary of rhyme, just because sometimes I feel like us as poets we force ourselves to make it rhyme, and then it kind of shows, kind of takes some life and emotion and feeling out of it when you do that. So I kind of, if the ride comes, it comes. If it doesn't, I don't worry about it.
I don't have a lot of experience writing rhyming stuff, but I think I'm going to try it. Would you say that poetry was like a really good tool for dealing with, controversy?
Dealing with controversy, yes, it's good for dealing with controversy. It's also good for exploring your own controversy.
Yes.
Um,
There we go.
Controversy of the world. I think it's like a very reflective thing, especially when you're writing poetry about like the stuff in life that you just need to kind of get through. I wrote this poem, this book mostly when I moved to LA to be in a program. It was Bard College, but there was like their LA program. And I just did not like LA. It was the first time I lived alone. So I was living in a city I didn't connect with, and I was living alone after having lived with people I went to like college with. So I just felt really alone in that place. I did have therapy. I couldn't go to a therapist, so I just started writing.
Very nice.
And that helped me survive that year in LA. And I actually came up, it was like spring break for that program. And I came back to the Bay Area to sleep on a friend's couch just so I wasn't in LA. And I got asked to read at Lyric and Dirges, which is Sharon Coleman's reading. I was just like, all of the stuff I have, like the literary community in Oakland has heard it. And I've had like, people in the audience like, hey, we want to hear some new stuff. I didn't want that to happen again. So like I didn't want to read like the old stuff, so I was like, all I have is like this depressing stuff in writing. So like kind of like the last minute, I just decided to read it, and literally the director of Nomadic Press was in the audience. He was just like, do you have any more of that? I was just like, yes, I'm alive. I'm still depressed. But also like, that was in like 2014. And then I moved back to the Bay Area immediately after that teaching program. And I didn't have like the final copy for him until like 2017. It was a joke in Nomadic that was like, it won't take you as long to write Vernon's book, because it just took me so long. Yeah, so, write that stuff that's hard and share it, connect with people, because we're all emotional beings.
How old were you when you
It was like high school. In high school, I used to just like, when I was in high school, we used to have to wrap our books and like, at the beginning of the year, our mom would like get old like grocery bags and wrap our books in the paper because she didn't want the fee at the end of the year if they got messed up. And I used to write on those a lot. And then like the margins of just like notes that I was taking in class. As you can see, like I'm very much motivated by history. So I think that's just something that I started in high school and it just kind of like grew with me. Because when I first started writing, I was, what's your name again? I'm sorry. Javier. When I was talking to Javier earlier, Javier told me about short stories. And I started undergrad writing like horror, like kind of like these like horror mixed like slave narratives. And that's what got me into an MFA program. And then when I got to my MFA program, people were just like, very poetic style. You should write poetry more. And then I started focusing on poetry more, and years passed, and this book came out. And now I have like an editor telling me you should write prose. So now I'm trying that.
How was the process of putting people together? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you all brought all these ones, and what I'm trying to say, how was the process of choosing which ones are going to be part of the book and which ones you decided to keep to yourself, because probably those maybe way too personal or were Well, I don't think they're gonna like it. How was the process of choosing which one?
One thing you should know about me is there's nothing I feel is too personal for me to share with the world. It gets me in trouble with my family sometimes. It's like, yeah, I gotta be telling our personal business. And I'm just like, because it shaped me who I am. It shaped who I am. So writing the book, I was just writing. And I think that's something more people should do. And like, I've even had professors in my MFA program tell me this is right. And then like, after you feel like you've had enough, you have enough stuff, go through all of the stuff you wrote, you can just like pick out the best. But kind of with this one, if you read it all together, they're like lines that repeat throughout. And there are like moments that repeat. And that kind of like, that was a thread I noticed like after I kind of had like this document of stuff. And mind you, I did send my publisher a document. He was like, oh, let me try again. So then like, because it was like, you know, I had a contract for like a year and a half. I was like, I need to get something. So I just sent something and I'm gonna try this again. And then like, another thing I did was every time I went to a reading, which, you know, I told you my story about people yelling at me. That's probably a trauma I need to accept. I use those as deadlines. Like, so if someone asked me to read at an open mic or something, I would always say yes, and then make sure or do the best I could to have a new poem by that reading. So that was a way for me to just keep writing, because I need deadlines. That's why I'm going back to school now, I guess. Structure and deadlines, because I need people telling me when stuff is due, or else it's just gonna sit in my USB drive.
You like geography, where you talk about how you felt when you were in LA, how you felt when you were here, but there's something in your future, you're going to move into the years. How do you think that's going to influence your work?
I had no idea yet. I have never been to New York. I'm from the East Coast. The closest I got was I lived in Philadelphia for a year, but New York never spoke to me. I'm one of those people. I'm just like, you know, I'm supposed to be there. I will be there. And now, like, you know, Columbia was the only school I got into. And then I had to like weigh down my mother being on the East Coast. She's getting older. So just like, you know, being a 4-hour drive from home or a 90-minute plane ride. But part of me just is really excited to be back in the Appalachians again. You can see that it inspired my work. I've been watching Miss Maisel. I don't know if you watch Miss Maisel, but I keep telling my partner, I was like, we're gonna move to New York and have Miss Maisel summers. So she's like out in the Adirondacks on a lake at night, and it's beautiful. So I'm excited just to be back in, you know, an old mountain range and to explore it more because I have never explored it. So I'm excited to see even what New York is going to bring. Like, excited to be in Harlem. Zora Neale Hurston is someone who I like, think is like a godmother to me, so to kind of be in the stomping grounds where she wrote a lot of her stuff and grew as an academic. I'm excited. I'm excited to be in that space because I don't know what it's going to do to me yet. I'm just excited for it. I've been in Oakland for 11 years. And my school is closing. My school is on the list of the closures for OUSD. It's community day school. I teach expulsion students. So when they get expelled, they come to my school. So, you know, we've been fighting because we don't want that school to close because of the future options for students who get expelled aren't what they're getting at my school. When I first got there, it was kind of like, here's a filing cabinet of packets. And I was just like, I'm not a packet teacher. That's not me. It would be very boring if I'm sitting in a classroom and not like talking and interacting and hearing the thought processes of my students. So like, me and my team, we have really changed the face of that school. So it's in closing, it's a pain in the heart, but it's also like, it just feels like Oakland is like, it's time for you to just like take a break from me. Yeah. Yeah, another brief.
I had a question. You talked about identity, history, race, politics, nature. In your writing, what do you see as like the role of poetry in expressing the intersection of all this in your writing and sharing it out? It seems very powerful hearing you read it. It's one thing to read it, another thing to read it, and to hear you read it to us. So.
I just think poetry is a great place to explore like all of those fringe identities, and to kind of like when I was writing this book, it was like I had to like flash back to fourth grade. So I was just like, yeah, like I was really called the F word and the N word like within like weeks of like for the first time. So it's like just a space for me to explore it, and also. I guess I wanted to get it out quickly, if that makes any sense. Now, writing a novel, I'm slowing down. But like when I was like living in LA by myself, and when I came back here, I'm still like kind of like in some ways sad and depressed just from, having been there alone and still unpacking what I was unpacking while I lived there. Poetry just seemed like a good way to do it because I don't think I was ready to kind of explore it prose because prose there's like less white space out there, and I would have to like fill that white space with a lot of like stuff that is still triggering to me. And that's like also with the bad press. I had an editor that was like one-on-one, and we just talked on the phone. And there were like moments where I'm just like, I have to like talk to my therapist, like I gotta talk to my editor about this part of my book this week, and I know it's just gonna throw my week off. But also just like my editor was like, in some ways, I'm just like, are you a therapist? Because you're just kind of got me to talk about and explore these things more. So maybe that was like also kind of like the step I needed so I could like write it out in prose, which I'm trying right now, which is also really hard. Just because I'm on like the second chapter, and it's just like that second chapter has been sitting there for like since November. Just because I'm just like, I'm not ready to, that second chapter is heavy, because I'm like having some active flashback to some stuff that is really troubling and bothering me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think you bring up a good point for writers too, because it is therapeutic and it's good to have other support as you're writing. You bring up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. One of my friends back home asked me, and I know her personally from growing up, so I know there's a lot of trauma in her story, her narrative. She asked me, like, how did you write your book? And I was like, just kind of make sure you're going to therapy on a weekly basis and write it. Like I said, I share everything. I overshare. Y'all didn't see me ugly cry today, but it happens. It happens.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Writing prose hard.
Writing prose is hard just because, I wouldn't even say it's hard, it's just more time consuming for me. And I want to say it right, especially writing about my father who's passed away. It's like, I don't want to give a one-sided story. Because, it's dynamic, like when you have like an abusive parent, because they weren't abusive all the time. I've seen another cry. So it's like, having to get through that. So like, I want people, especially since he's a Black man, I want people to see that the world made him. He wasn't just that for no reason. So it's just been hard.
Do you make poetry writing and, writing and good work you do with your students?
It's so hard. That I get asked this question all the time. Like, you must get your students to write the best poetry. I'm just like, actually, I can't. Because a lot of my students come to me guarded. And I usually only have them for about like a year or half a year. So it's kind of like, just when I'm thinking like, oh, we can probably go into some deeper poetry or go into poetry or some deeper writing, getting them to write like personal essays or something. It's just like years over. And I also just like, because I have them for such a short time, it's just like, you need to, by the time you leave here, we need to have read a couple of books, because a lot of my students have never read whole books. And also, you need to be able to write a successful paper, because I want you to go into like English class after this feeling confident. Because it's like a lot of the times we get students, who are lashing out against the education itself. They have some issue, they don't want to be in the classroom because it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of writing. With us, it's kind of like you only have like 3 or 4 other people in the classroom with you, so like you need to get to the root of why you don't like reading and writing, or else you're going to get readmitted, and you're gonna lash out again and get expelled again. You can't have that happen. So it's just like a impetus to just kind of give our students like their critical thinking and critical reading and writing skills, so they feel confident going back to confidence in high school. I've gotten them to have a really good urban legend unit that I do every Halloween, so I get students to write that vein of horror. But I can't get them to like really open up about themselves that much. I don't have enough time, unfortunately. Yes, I'm sure.
Thank you so
I've
much.
been back for 3 years.
Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming and listening and all the wonderful questions. And so we'll be happy